Hello everyone, time to draft Vintage Masters here on Magic Online, a special set only available online and of course with the Power 9. Now I sadly didn't open a Mox or a Black Lotus but an Ancient Tomb instead, so I'll have to just see what's good and limited instead. Flametongue Kavu certainly qualifies, Urnamjin is very powerful, and then there's the commons, which are quite strong compared to regular sets. Predatory Night Stalker here, basically an Edict, and a 3/2 creature, but Flametongue Kavu is pretty much the best deal you can make in limited. I'm just gonna stick with the red card for now, and who knows, maybe goblins are open. That would be a sweet archetype to draft. Alright, Symbiotic Worm is a bit too expensive for my tastes, although green has Nature's Lore to ramp up to in this format. Then there's Radiant Archangel, I'm never sure about that. Definitely solid, but a double white card, maybe not the best card to pair with Flametongue Kavu. Flametongue Kavu is sweet with Astral Slide, by the way. I really like the fact that you can basically pick powerful uncommons in this format and then draft your deck around them. So let's see what else we have. Goblin Settler, Blazing Spectre. Well, that's a solid card, 2/2 haste, and your opponent has to start discarding once you have it. The other cards, not too interesting. Brainstorm is very good in constructed, not as good in limited. You need a solid amount of shuffling effects to make that work. I like Soltari Trooper. It's basically a 2/2 unblockable on offense. No defensive capabilities. I think Radiant is okay, and Blazing Spectre is fine. I think I'm going with the Trooper here. I haven't really drafted white aggressive decks yet, and the Trooper might be a good way to start that. Alright, more expensive cards here. Ether Mutation, Penumbra Worm. Yeah, not all that exciting. Gustcloak Harrier is powerful. This is the Gust Cloak mechanic. I don't know if you remember that. If the creature becomes blocked, you can choose to untap it and it's removed from combat. So it's as if they never fought in combat, basically, which isn't bad. No red cards to speak of. Goblin Matron is fine, but not what I'm looking for. Killer Whale, Phantom Nomad. Yeah, I really like the two white cards here. I think it's between Phantom Nomad and Gustcloak Harrier. Not only because I have the Trooper already, but also because they seem to be the strongest cards in the pack. Also, cheap white creatures are at a premium because you want to have something to flashback Battle Screech with. Now, I'm not sure what's better yet. Nomad basically has 2 lies, whereas Gustcloak Harrier just has evasion. I'm gonna take the Nomad because it only costs 2, and it doesn't have the double white casting cost, which is a bit restrictive on the Gustcloak Harrier. Alright, these cards don't look amazing to me. Another Scourge Familia, which you might, I don't know, combine with Necropotence or something like that. Haven't really seen that card in action. Reviving Vapors is not particularly strong, but there's a couple of red-white cards here that I find interesting. Aftershock, Forgotten Cave, Beetleback Chief, Taros Faithful, and Skirk Drill Sergeant. So quite a lot to choose from. I haven't really gotten red signals up until this point, so I'm kind of hesitant to just take a double red card here, and the Drill Sergeant is really only good in goblins. So Beetleback Chief would be a nice way to generate an advantage, although Taros Faithful basically does the same thing. If I knew that I was going to end up in red, I would be interested in maybe some goblins or even the Forgotten Cave, but because I'm not, I'm just going to be conservative and take the Faithful here. It's not the best in a defensive deck to have a Taros Faithful, but on the other hand, if my aggressive white creatures are evasive, then I don't mind just casting a 4-mana 1/4 that also gains me 4. Also, 2 cards that work really nicely with Astral Slide, should I get that later on in the draft. There's a Burning of Xinye. Didn't even know that was in Vintage Masters. It's not really a card I'm looking for. I don't have any protection from red creatures. It's kind of solid with the Phantom Nomads, but this isn't Cube where you can build your deck to just be absurdly abusive with wildfire effects like that one. Kindle is only fine, Chimeric Idol is nice, Goblin Commando is nice, and then there's Mistmoon Griffin, and I could just continue drafting white cards with this Griffin. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think overall it's better than the red cards, and it works quite nicely reanimating Taros Faithful or even lesser cards. Here, Chartooth Cougar would be the way to go if cycling is still something I'm considering. Lightning Rift and Astral Slide, of course, being the two options. The Cougar also splashes Flametongue Kovu quite nicely. I don't like Chaos Warp, and looking at the alternative cards, there's really only Cloud Djinn, which does cost 6 and isn't all that impressive in such a powerful format. I'm gonna go with the Cougar here and see how that works out. It's at the very least, it's going to allow the splash of Flametongue Kovu a bit better. The idea behind these basic land cyclers is that if you draw them when you already have the land, it's a great 6 mana 4/4, and if you don't, it helps you splash. Not gonna take the Goblin here, but I'm looking at Gustcloak Harrier and Mystic Zealot as two really nice options, and the Harrier has to be better. I'm already heavily white, and I don't have a single 3-drop yet. It's also evasive. Kind of sad to pass Scapland. On the other hand, these cards aren't all that powerful, to be honest. Falter, a second Mistborn Griffin. Wow, yeah, this could actually be a pretty nice Mistborn Griffin deck if I can somehow make sure that my good cards are at the top of my graveyard, like Flametongue Kovu, and the Mistborn Griffin is just threatening to get it back. This is quite powerful. I'm gonna take that. It looks like the white cards are wheeling, which is a great sign. Looks like I'm in the right colors at least. I love Deathblade Elite in decks that can pump its power. If you can't, it's a bit unexciting. It's really only good against opposing 1/1s, and then you kind of take out a Waterfront Bouncer maybe. I'm also not too interested in just spending 2 mana to make it survive. I like Shelter. Shelter is just a powerful card, but I'm going to be quite conservative here. Take a second Cougar to make sure that my red splash is just rock solid going into pack 2. I wasn't expecting Blazing Spectre to wheel. That's interesting. It's not a card I'm really interested in with being so heavily white. That said, I think Brilliant Halo is just the pick for me, making my evasive creatures better. It also returns to your hand, and I might not play it, but it's definitely a solid pickup. Here, Gilded Light is the card that I take if I just want to send the best signals, and given that I can't use any of these cards in any way, I'm just going to do that. Alright, red and white cards are wheeling, which is good. Could take the Drill Sergeant, which is clearly only a 2 mana 2/1. Aftershock is fine if I end up playing more red. And the second Gilded Light, I'm not too interested in. I'm gonna take the Aftershock. I've made the experience that it's usually quite the good card, especially when your opponent casts it. I'm often surprised about its efficiency. Don't like Falter in a deck full of evasive guys, but I'm gonna take this Burning of Zinye. Even if it doesn't end up making the deck, it's still a nice pickup. Alright, this is already quite nice. I don't expect to be playing this. I think that the 2 Cougars and a single Mountain will probably allow me to cast Flametongue Kovu and whatever I want. I won't be able to pump the Cougar, but that's not a big concern. Alright, still no Power 9, Goblin Piledriver, the rare here. Clearly not the card for this deck. I have the option between another Phantom Nomad, Shelter, and Exile, which is just a solid removal spell on 3 mana. I don't like the fact that you have to telegraph it so clearly, but it is a powerful card. I would say that Phantom Nomad is probably just a better pick. It's pretty tough to deal with. Your opponent is always, sometimes even has to 2-for-1 himself, and that's because creatures are overall weaker in Vintage Masters because the creatures come from older sets, pre-modern era sets, and yeah, a 2/2 that just turns into a 1/1 when it takes 2 damage it's actually quite the good package. I want to be proactive. I don't want to start playing too many of these exiles, and I would love to have a Shelter. I just can't reasonably take it over such an efficient creature. Alright, Goblin Goon, that's interesting, but there's a Gustcloak Harrier competing with it. Spark Spray and Secluded Step would be interesting if I had more of a cycling theme. I'm really just a white weenie deck at this point, so I'm going to take the Harrier. I would love to see the Step wheel. I want to have a bunch of cycling cards in these kind of decks, and especially the cycling lands, but here this pick is I think pretty clear. Alright. This is not a great pack for me. As you can see, I can't cast most of these cards, and the Goblin General isn't really a card that I can support in this strategy. I like the Bodyguard. It makes my other good creatures even better, and it's solid on its own. I could pick up a second Halo. That doesn't seem very reasonable. Then there's Afterlife, which is a nice way to deal with troublesome creatures, of which there are definitely going to be some. And right now I'm not all that interested in running Aftershock. So it's either the Bodyguard, just to work on the White Weenie theme, or the Afterlife, because I don't have any removal and I might actually need it. I think the Bodyguard is the better pick for me. I'm still hopeful that I will find ways to generate some flying tokens like Battle Screech. If that isn't the case, my deck is not looking too strong. Rites of Initiation would be great with that said Battle Screech, but here it's once again Shelter or something else, and something else in this case is Balanish Trapper, which is just a tapper and a very cost-efficient one. I once again will not take Shelter here. Also a nice Psychic Talk, but not for me. Come on, Burning of Zinnia number 2. No, I don't think that's happening. I can't play a card that just kills everything I have. So here it's Deathblade Elite or Skirk Drill Sergeant. As I've said, the Drill Sergeant only a 2-mana 2/1. Deathblade Elite has some potential, but without a way to pump it, I'm not the biggest fan. I'll just take it and see what develops here. Alright, what does Predator Flagship do? You can give a creature flying for 2, and for 5 and a tap you can destroy a creature with flying. That's interesting. Don't actually think that's horrible. It does cost 5, which is a bit much and doesn't really work with what I'm trying to do, but it's definitely more than playable. I like Flowstone Hellion quite a bit. It's a 5-mana 3/3 with haste, but if your opponent doesn't block it, it turns into a 5/1. Pillaging Horde is also reasonable, but of course in this deck I would rather have the single red card. I'm gonna take the Hellion here. The Flagship is sweet, but the Hellion is just a very solid aggro card. Oh boy, I see an Astral Slide. There's also Goblin Ringleader and another Cougar, even a Secluded Step, but Astral Slide with Teros Faithful and Flametongue Kavu. Now, I didn't at all draft a deck around Astral Slide. I think the opposite is the case, but I have to go for it here. We're still in the middle of the draft, so I can pick up hopefully some more Enters the Battlefield cards and cycling cards to make this card work. Oh yeah, now I'm a lot more excited about this deck. Not because it has become better, but it has definitely become more interesting. Rocky Tar Pit fetches a Swamp. I don't think that's something I need, so let's just take another Deathblade Elite. This could be a Shelter that I'm interested in. Goblin Matron and Reckless Charge, not cards I would play, so let's take the Shelter, who knows. I might even have to main deck Gilded Light now that I have an Astral Slide. With Gilded Light actually protecting you from a couple of burn spells, but also Chainer's Edict, which is quite relevant. Alright, Spark Spray and Secluded Step are wheeling, which is absolutely phenomenal. I like the Step a bit better because the Spark Spray occupies a spell slot in your decks, whereas Secluded Step is just basically a free roll, making sure that you don't draw too many lands if you don't want to. Here, I think the Halo is one of the weaker cards, but I'm just taking it because I could theoretically play it. Shelter coming around, Scarp Prospector is not for me. And then, yeah, these cards are pretty much unexciting. I'm going to take the Brindle Shroud. Foil Claws of Wirewood, why not? It's actually kind of good against me. And yeah, now there is basically one more pack where I will hopefully pick up some cycling cards, maybe another Teros Faithful, and I wouldn't complain about a Black Lotus either. And here we are with a Goblin Lackey as the rare. So not only is that not a Black Lotus, it also wouldn't even have a reasonable trigger in the deck that I've drafted. Beetleback Chief is the card that is kind of solid with Astral Slide, but it is double red, so it's basically out of the question. The cards that interest me here are Noble Templar and Forgotten Cave, just because they have cycling and they will add something to the deck. Now, as I've said before, Noble Templar does occupy a spell slot. It also works as a land, and it's actually not an unreasonable 6-drop to just cast. I like Forgotten Cave, and I could see playing a mountain, the 2 Cougars, and the Forgotten Cave. But playing a cycling card in your splash color, especially when it's such a small splash, is not all that great. If you're lacking the red source, you are unhappy about drawing a tapped land, and even if you aren't, you will just have to wait a long time until you can actually cycle. So I think the Noble Templar is the safer pick. Here, Goblin Settler is actually an interesting comes into playability. It does, however, mean that I need to play more red, and of course, clearly it isn't the highest impact card on its own. So Thopter Squadron actually also works with Astral Slide, although super slowly. So that might not be all that interesting. I'm looking at Solar Blast here, to be honest. It does cost double red to cycle, but it's just a 4 mana removal spell, and my mana is going to be perfectly fine. I sometimes will have 2 red sources, so playing, for example, 2 mountains, even then I could find them quite easily, and then I could have a nice cycle going on. Radiance Judgment is fine. I think I like Solar Blast a bit better. It's a bit more versatile. I'm gonna take that. And I see a Terror's Faithful. Let's check what else is here. Nullrod, constructed card, exile, and foil. The step, of course, a card that I would like to cycle, but I'm gonna take Terror's Faithful here. That's, I think, pretty easy decision. Sphere of Resistance. Goblin Patrol, Rocky Target, yeah. I think it has to be Goblin Trenches here. Goblin Trenches is just a pretty nice late game card, and when you look at the fact that I'm going to be playing at least 3 land cyclers, then I might end up in a position where my small creatures aren't really doing enough anymore, but the Goblin Trenches allow me to just convert the excess lands into a sizable army. I'm going to take the Trenches here. Quite a fun card also. Here it's Goblin Patrol or Spark Spray. I'm taking Spark Spray, another Psychotop. I don't want to play against these. Another Spark Spray is great. It will cycle if I don't need it, and it's going to kill pesky small creatures, of which there are quite a few. So it's actually a solid removal spell in this format. So overall, my deck is going to have a bit more red than I earlier thought earlier. On the other hand, I only have the 2 Gustcloak Harriers that will cost me double white. Let's see, I hide the Mountain Valley. I'm not splashing green from the looks of it. And then, yeah, not the strongest deck I've ever seen, but definitely a nice deck with a solid game plan. This pack has 2 Wall of Diffusions for me, which I don't really want. I have the 2 Faithfuls, but I really don't want to be a defensive deck if that's at all possible. So I think my best choice here is probably Seal of Cleansing, but that's not even a card I would want to main deck in this format. I'm not playing Skark Prospector, so the only alternative is hate drafting a card, and none of these make me really want to take them, so I'm going to take Seal of Cleansing for the sideboard. Caldera Lake, not fixing my mana here. Gilded Light, I've already said, probably a main deck card now that I have Astral Slide. And yeah, once again, pretty much the only choice. That's a very late Banalish Trapper. Now there's also a Stoic Champion, which gets larger when you cycle card. I think that's a bit too cute though. Yeah, Banalish Trapper is just rock solid, very powerful on its own. And this deck needs some power. The Trapper definitely helps. Here, Forgotten Cave is better than Shelter or Giant Strength. It does have some disadvantages, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good card. I actually don't think that I want another Bodyguard, but I'm happy to try out the Thopter Squadron. If you don't spend additional mana, it's going to be a 3/3 fly for 5, which is very solid. And then sometimes it's going to be even better. Alright. Gonna take a Null Ward here. Not that somebody brings it in against my Thopter Squadron. And yeah, I think my deck is pretty much done. Like I've said, didn't really come together perfectly, but I'm looking forward to the Flametongue Kavu, Terror's Faithful, Astral Slide interactions with 2 Mistmoon Griffins to hopefully get some of these pieces back. And then the rest of the deck is really just a white weenie deck with a touch of red. This is going to be fun. Alright, Carnage and Nightscape Familiar are actually quite solid. I think I want to play against Nightscape Familiar more than I want to play against Carnophage. Wall of Diffusion and a Sarcomancy. That used to be a rare too. Alright, let's see how the deck building works out. So this is all in. I have these 2 lands and the Thopter Squadron, Goblin Trenches. Alright, so I have to keep these in mind. Probably going to go for a standard 17 land build with the 2 cycling lands, and clearly I'll have to cut quite a few cards. Don't think that Burning of Zinnia is what this deck wants to do, but Aftershock, for example, now is definitely an option, as I won't be as aggressive as I earlier thought. So Seal of Cleansing I don't think is a main deck card. These 4 drops I really like, and the 2 5 drops are also doing a good job. Astrocyte and Goblin Trenches for the late game. Solitary Trooper, Phantom Nomads, yeah, all these 2 drops are amazing, so these are definitely in. I currently have 20 creatures, but 3 of them are cycling creatures, so that's actually not too much. However, the Deathblade Elite is really only good if I also run the Brilliant Halos, and then I'm still putting quite a lot of eggs in one basket. Now, Phantom Nomad is also really good with Brilliant Halo, because it turns into a 3/4, then it turns into a 2/3, and then it turns into a 1/2 that is basically unkillable. So you create an unkillable 2-drop with the help of Brilliant Halo, which is quite nice. By the way, the Phantom creatures also work quite nicely with Astral Slide. So the one problem is I do have to cut some cards from this deck, and that probably means that some of the cute interactions will have to leave the deck to make it viable. One thing that I could do is just to cut both Deathblade Elites and both Brilliant Halos, and then probably even, yeah, most likely even both Shelters. I'm also looking at this Aftershock, which I might not have the cards to support. Let's see how that would look if I just take all of this out. Then yeah, I'm at 25. I think I could go with 16 lands with all these cyclers and 3 land cyclers. I'm very unlikely to be mana screwed, so that would mean I only have to cut 1 more card. Now, playing both Gilded Lights is actually a bit greedy if I only have a single Astral Slide and no other way to really make use of the Gilded Light. I want to keep the Benevolent Bodyguard to protect my better creatures, basically. It's usually going to be a tempo efficient card, which is why I like it. I want to keep in my Cyclers to make Astral Slide work the best it can. I'm unsure about Aftershock, and I think looking at this, I'm quite sure that I can do with 16 lands. So the easiest cut would just be Aftershock, and then I'm pretty much never in need of a second red. I think I like that best. Kind of unfortunate not to have all these sweet interactions, but I want to maximize Astral Slide and the overall plan of this deck. So kind of difficult how many red sources I want, because the 2 Cougars do help a lot in finding me the 1 red source that I need. I could use a second one for Solar Blast, cycling, and if I cast a Cougar, I wouldn't be unhappy to be able to pump it twice, but that's really marginal. So if I'm looking at my white cards, I really only need double white for the Harrier, or if I ever want to cast 2 white spells in a turn. So my white requirements aren't actually too bad. I also have a white Plane Cycler, and the rest, yeah, should actually work out fine. If I have 10 white sources in this deck, I think I'm very safe from any kind of mana screw. That gives me 6 red sources and the 2 Cougars. So basically 8 red sources and 11 white sources to cast all my spells. And because there isn't a big pull towards just having even more white cards, even more white sources, I think that's fine. I hope that I will never be in the position that my Gustlock Harrier is not castable. That's pretty much the only thing that I have to be careful of with this build. And if I wanted to maximize my chances of casting the Harrier, I believe that an 11-5 split would actually be a bit better even. Now, I have to keep in mind that whenever I cycle a Cougar, I'm not having it, I'm not casting it on turn 6, so there's actually a cost associated to that as well. I like how this is looking. I love all the cycling in this deck, not only because of Astral Slide, but also because it's gonna prevent me from the unfortunate losses where you don't draw your lands, or not the right, well, you just stumble in the beginning, and cycling really helps in that regard. All right, this is great. Let's see how the Astral Slide deck performs.